The girls were wailing as their mother set them in the crib and slung a backpack over her shoulder. On the fridge, held by a rusty magnet, was a single note. "I wasn't born to be a mother. You deal with them." The slam of the door echoed down the narrow apartment hallway like a crack in something fragile, something that would never be whole again. It was the middle of the night, when Daniel woke to the sound of both twins crying in sync. He reached across the bed. Empty. His heart already knew. He ran to their room and found them red-faced, eyes wild with panic. The air reeked of dirty diapers, but worse than the smell was the silence. Her silence. The fridge was empty. The formula had run out 2 days earlier. The gas had been shut off. 3 overdue bills, power, water, rent, sat on the coffee table like executioners awaiting his defeat. Daniel sank to the floor, one daughter in his arms, the other still sobbing in the crib. The note on the fridge burned worse than hunger. Rosa, the neighbor in 3B, heard the cries and knocked. When Daniel opened the door, eyes swollen and a diaper in hand, she didn't need to ask. She left, didn't she? He just nodded. Rosa scooped up the twins, made a bottle using milk borrowed from her grandson, and sat with Daniel on the front steps. "You're not alone, son." But Daniel felt alone, betrayed, crushed. There were no screams, no fights, just a heavy, suffocating silence and a throbbing ache in his chest. The woman he had loved, the one who vowed to share everything with him, had discarded their daughters like old boxes, and she'd left that note. For 3 days, Daniel moved on autopilot. He changed diapers, fed them borrowed formula, boiled water in an electric kettle Rosa had lent him. When one of the girls spiked a fever, he cried harder than she did. "I'm sorry, baby. Daddy's gonna figure it out," he whispered, forehead pressed to hers. He walked the streets with an old shopping cart, selling homemade fudge made from chocolate scraps a local bakery donated. Each sale gave him a flicker of hope. Each rejection cut a little deeper. But no matter how hard the day was, he came home smiling, because they smiled when they saw him. Daniel made a choice. He would never show them the note. He tucked it away in a drawer, alongside their birth certificates and the wedding ring she'd left by the sink. He swore to himself, they will never feel abandoned, they will never know they weren't wanted, because I will love them for both of us. And that's how it began. 1 father, 2 babies, an empty fridge, and a cruel note that would mark the start of a journey, of pain, of sacrifice, and a redemption the world hadn't seen coming. The alarm went off at 5 a.m., but Daniel was already awake. He had learned to sense his daughter's cries before a single sound left their mouths. One always woke up hungry, the other just needing to be held. He moved between bottles and soft lullabies, with sunken eyes and hands rough from scrubbing laundry by hand. He washed diapers in the sink using a bar of soap. He hung sheets on a makeshift clothesline, humming a tune he'd invented just for them. "Daddy is here. Daddy will stay. The world might hurt, but we'll find our way." It was the only poetry he knew, and it was enough. The twins smiled when he sang. After their morning baths, he rushed to prepare the lunchboxes he sold downtown. He used leftover rice and beans from Miss Nayer's diner, a kind woman who'd always say, "This is a 2-person job, son. You can't do it alone." But he did, because he had to. With a backpack strapped on, a worn-out stroller, and the lunchboxes stacked inside a cardboard box tied with string, Daniel braved sun, rain, and disapproving stares. People in the square knew him as the twins' dad. Among the street vendors, he had earned a quiet kind of respect. In the afternoons, after coming home with a few coins, he made makeshift baby food, juggling a spoon in one hand and a daughter in the other. When the other cried, he rocked her gently with his foot while reading old accounting manuals. He was studying online, in time that didn't exist. Nights were short, he rarely slept more than 3 hours straight. Sometimes he cried in the shower so no one would see. Other times, he'd fall asleep sitting on the couch with both girls clinging to his chest, like 2 angels guarding a warrior who couldn't afford to fall. They didn't yet know how much their father was hurting. He never spoke of their mother, never answered the neighbors' questions. One day Rosa said, "You're a saint, Daniel." He gave a tired half-smile and replied, "I'm not a saint. I'm just a father." He kept the pain locked deep inside, a place no one could reach, until slowly the girls began to walk, to speak. Daddy was the first word for both, on the same day, and Daniel broke. He fell to his knees in the living room, crying with them in his arms, as if he'd just won a medal. Something shifted that day. Pain became strength, absence became fuel, and the invisible man made a decision. He would do the impossible. Every day he repeated to himself, "I won't be a victim. I'll be the reason they're proud." He didn't know how. He just knew he would. And that was enough. The living room floor was worn, bare concrete, but that day it felt like a stage. The twins, just over a year old, took their first steps. They wobbled, laughed, and plopped down on their bottoms, looking at Daniel as if they had just conquered the world. He dropped his plate of rice and shouted with joy, "My girls walked." Happiness was simple. A giggle, a small victory. But for Daniel, it was proof that every sacrifice had meaning. He captured the moment with a phone borrowed from Rosa, who was now more than a neighbor. She was family. "These girls are as strong as their daddy," she'd say, wiping her eyes. Daniel taped construction paper on the walls with letters of the alphabet, drew with colored pencils, and made up stories using empty margarine tubs. He was father, teacher, nurse, and clown. The girls started naming objects with words he invented. "This one here is the brave little broom." Life was still hard. The power got shut off twice that month. They slept by candlelight, and he turned it into a game. "Tonight is camping night." He cooked instant noodles and called it a royal recipe. He never let poverty turn into pain, always a blanket of dignity over the lack. One afternoon, outside the night school where he studied, Daniel met his first ally beyond the neighborhood. His name was Mauricio, an accounting teacher who froze when he saw Daniel holding two toddlers in his arms while taking notes with a pen in his mouth and balancing his notebook with his chin. "You should be teaching, not just learning," Mauricio said, moved. Daniel smiled without arrogance. "One day, I will." The teacher brought him inside, gave him a stack of used books, and offered to help. "You've got a sharp mind and a golden heart. All you need is a chance." With his studies, Daniel started to unravel the world of finance. He created a budget in a worn blue notebook, tracking every cent earned and spent. He showed it to the girls like it was a magic trick. "Look here, Daddy turned $5 into 30. See that?" The twins grew up hearing words like compound interest, fixed expenses, and long-term investment. They didn't understand yet, but they looked at their father like he was a genius. And he was. Not because he knew everything, but because he never gave up. And that teaches more than any school ever could. On a cold night, with the girls asleep in his arms, Daniel scribbled something on the back of a past-due bill. "They will grow up strong, and when they do, they'll know love built it all." He folded the paper and tucked it deep into a drawer, right beside their mother's note. Two ends of the same story. Daniel started waking up before sunrise and going to bed well past midnight. His old blue notebook, now worn and full of scribbles, had become his most prized possession. In it, he jotted down ideas, financial goals, dreams, and even drawings from his daughters, like lucky charms. "This month's goal, get out of the red," he'd whisper to himself. Slowly, the lunchboxes turned into praised meals. The homemade food, seasoned with love and struggle, earned him loyal customers. One day, a lawyer from the square pulled him aside and said, "Your beans taste like childhood, man. Ever thought about selling through an app?" Daniel gave a shy smile, but the idea lingered. He began researching how delivery apps worked, taught himself everything, between feedings and budget sheets. He built a simple menu and asked a local delivery guy for help. No brand, no logo, just an old phone and a faith that grew stronger with every passing day. At 3 years old, the twins were helping organize utensils and pack meals. "We're helping Daddy," said one. "We're business partners," shouted the other. Daniel cried in secret. Every gesture from them was a push away from the edge, an edge that no longer frightened him as it once had. On weekends, he took accounting lessons from Mauricio at home, the girls drawing pretend charts beside them. "This is Daddy's company," he'd say, pointing to a shoebox full of receipts. "And this is the future we're building." One day, without telling him, Mauricio posted a photo of Daniel studying with his daughters in his arms. The caption read, "This man is the greatest example of resilience I've ever seen. A single father, a fighter, a student. One day the world will know his name." The post went viral. People started reaching out to Daniel. They asked for financial advice, wanted to know how he managed it all. A local news channel featured him. They showed the twins helping their dad prepare meals. "We're Daddy's company," they said, their voices proud. The video hit thousands of views. With this small wave of fame came more orders. Daniel expanded production and bought an industrial stove, 20 monthly payments. He was still poor, still behind on rent, but now there was a line of customers and hope. Every meal sold was another brick in the castle he'd vowed to build. And every night, before bed, he kept the same ritual. He hugged his daughters and whispered like a prayer, "You weren't left behind. You were chosen, and no one will ever take that from you." Outside, the city slept, but inside that humble apartment, a quiet revolution was already changing everything. The apartment was still small, but Daniel's world, and the girls, had grown too big to fit inside it. Now 5 years old, the twins helped with simple math, decorated the deliveries with sweet little notes, and called the food containers love stocks. The business had a name now, one that people recognized: Courage Meals. Daniel never stopped. With Mauricio's help, he registered the business legally as a micro-entrepreneur. He opened a bank account under the company's name and taught the girls how to log every cent in and out. When neighbors mocked him or said he was dreaming too big, he answered only with silence and work. Then one morning, everything changed. A young digital influencer ordered a meal and posted a heartfelt video praising the taste and the story of the twins' dad. Within a week, Courage Meals' Instagram went from 200 to 50,000 followers. With help from Rosa's nephew, Daniel launched a simple website and began accepting online orders. He invested what little he had in custom packaging with phrases like "a flavor that teaches" and "made by someone who never gives up." Every bite shared his story. Every like opened a new door. The twins were gifted tablets by followers. They used them to sketch business ideas and even created a Brave Girls Club where they taught neighborhood kids to save coins in piggy banks made from soda bottles. Daniel's pride was unmistakable. They're not just growing, they're building. For the girls' 6th birthday, they held a modest party in the town square. Cornmeal cake, balloons, simple joy. People came from nearby cities. They brought gifts, books, even clothes. A reporter asked, "Did you ever expect all this, Daniel?" He looked at his daughters and said, "I only hope to make it one more day. The rest is a miracle." With the money coming in, Daniel rented a larger kitchen space and bought a used motorcycle for deliveries. He said goodbye to the rickety old cart, but not to the effort. He still made sure to rise early, pack everything with the girls, and hum the same tune, "Daddy is here, Daddy will stay." At night, seeing his daughters asleep with children's finance books scattered beside them, he felt something new. It wasn't relief, it was purpose. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was just surviving. He was winning. And he knew the world had yet to witness what 3 broken hearts could build together. And in the back of the drawer, next to the old note she had left, he now kept something new: his daughter's drawings, 3 little stick figures holding hands, and a crayon-written caption underneath, "We're rich in love." At 7 years old, the twins already showed something rare: sharp, restless minds, just like their fathers. They built a goal board on the apartment wall. This month's goal: save up to buy new books. The old blue notebook had gone digital, but it was still the family's compass. During school break, they began recording short videos explaining finance to other kids. They used simple words, drawings, and loads of charm. They posted on the Courage Meals page. One video went viral. "What is compound interest with chocolate?" Over 1 million views in just 3 days. Business owners, educators, and journalists began reaching out to Daniel. He was overwhelmed by the attention but answered every message with humility. "I'm just a dad trying to teach what life taught me the hard way." When he was invited to speak at a private school, he brought the girls along. They stole the show. "This is our hero," they said on stage, pointing to Daniel. "He taught us money is just a tool. Love is the investment with the best return." The audience was in tears. A video of that moment made it to national news. It was the beginning of something far bigger than they had imagined. An educational tech company offered to sponsor the girls' project. Daniel hesitated. He feared the spotlight, hidden agendas. But after many meetings and clear guarantees, they accepted. With the support, they launched Educahart, an official channel for family financial education. A local kid edited the videos. The ideas came from kitchen table chats. Every script had to pass through Dad first. Nothing was fake. Everything was real. The twins still went to public school and helped run courage meals. Fame didn't change them. It only made their voices louder. Daniel started turning down opportunities that would pull him away from his daughters. "I'd rather spend 3 hours packing meals with them than be alone on a stage getting applause." The media called him the most inspiring father in Brazil. But he stayed grounded, still mopping the cafeteria floor like day one. One Sunday afternoon, sitting on the living room floor, the girls asked, "Daddy, do you miss Mom?" He paused, then met their eyes. "I miss the moment I believed she'd stay. But no, my loves, I have you, and that fills everything." They wrapped their arms around him tightly. Then for the first time he showed them the old note. "Read it aloud." The girls were quiet. One picked it up and said, "She missed the chance to see all of this happen." The other added, "But we didn't miss anything. We got everything," Daniel cried. And for the first time, he felt that the wound was healing. By the time they were 10, the twins had become a national reference in children's financial education. Their channel, Educahart, had over 2 million subscribers. Daniel still insisted on cooking on Saturdays, but now he was also being invited to speak at universities and corporate events. He received international invitations too, most of which he turned down. He only accepted the ones that allowed him to bring his daughters. "It's all or none," he'd say. And every time he stepped on stage holding their hands, it felt like watching a real-life redemption story unfold. The audience always rose to their feet. The girls' company was growing. They launched a gamified financial education startup. Apps, courses, books, all designed for children and families from low-income communities. Investors began to show interest, but Daniel only gave the green light after long conversations. "Here, trust is our currency," he'd say. They purchased their first official headquarters, a renovated old house in the very neighborhood they grew up in. Each room had a name: courage, respect, resilience. At the entrance, a plaque read, "Welcome to the place where love became business." The community saw them as local heroes. Daniel stayed humble. He drove a hybrid Corolla and lived in a spacious but modest home. His focus was education, values, and emotional well-being for his daughters. Yet by then, they had built real assets: rental apartments, investments, company shares. A quiet empire, built without noise or shortcuts. One Sunday morning, they got news that changed everything. The girls had been nominated for the Women of the Year award by one of the country's biggest magazines. The ceremony would air live on the nation's most watched talk show. Daniel almost said no, but the girls insisted, "This is our chance to show what you did." On the night of the event, they walked on stage in elegant but simple dresses. They looked into the camera and said, "This award belongs to our father, the man who washed diapers with one hand and taught compound interest with the other." They showed childhood photos of meals, of laundry lines, of beginnings. The auditorium wept. So did Daniel backstage. But it wasn't sadness. It was release. Every sleepless night, every humiliation, every reheated plate of rice, it had all been worth it. It was as if the world was finally seeing what he had always known, that true love builds empires. That same night, as the girls smiled under the spotlight, A woman across town turned off her TV with trembling hands, the same hands that once left a note on a refrigerator door. Now she sat in front of a blank screen, alone, in silence. She tried to call, sent a message. "I saw everything. I'm sorry." The reply came back, short but fair. "You don't know what you missed. They know what they gained. And that's enough." She didn't sleep that night. For the first time, she realized the abandonment she inflicted had become a silence no one else could fill. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning. Daniel was making coffee in the kitchen of their new home, a quiet place with a view of the mountains. The twins, now 25, were in the living room, mapping out the next investment round for their fintech. The peace in that house stood in stark contrast to the storm about to arrive. The doorbell rang. Daniel opened it and froze. Time seemed to stop. There she was, the woman who had once walked away, leaving him with 2 babies and a note. Thinner now, older. Eyes swollen, voice trembling. "Daniel, I have nowhere else to go." He said nothing, just looked at her, calm, unmoved. She stepped inside with her eyes downcast, like someone who already knew there was no place left for her. "I saw you on TV. I regret everything. I don't want money. I just want to see my daughters." Daniel took a deep breath. "Now you want to be a mother because they have something to offer. Where were you when there was no milk to give them?" She cried. "I was young. I didn't know what love meant." Daniel didn't shout, didn't throw her out. He simply pointed toward the living room where the twins sat. "Talk to them, but be ready. They're no longer the little girls you left with a note." She walked slowly toward the room, as if the floor beneath her might break. The girls recognized her instantly. One froze. The other simply asked, "Why?" Their mother collapsed to her knees, begging for forgiveness. She said she was alone, broke, that no one cared anymore. "You're all I have left." The silence that followed hurt more than any scream. Daniel didn't interfere. He let them choose their response. The girls looked at each other, eyes full of tears, and said, "You left at the beginning. He stayed till the end. We forgive you, but we don't forget. And we don't forget who held us when we fell." There was no hug, just a nod, cold, final. She walked out without turning back. Daniel watched her pass through the gate, now just a shadow of the past, finally brought to her knees. The girls wrapped their arms around him. "Dad, we just want you to know, nothing we are today would exist without you." He said nothing, but deep inside, he felt it. The wound had finally closed. That night, the 3 hands that built everything raised a glass of wine together. To the past, that broke us. To love, that rebuilt us. Daniel toasted in silence, eyes steady, the eyes of a man who knew he had won. Not with noise, but with dignity. And that, he knew, was the greatest victory of all. 5 years after the reunion that ended in farewell, the twins' fintech had been valued at over 3 billion reais. It was featured in magazines, studied in universities, and hailed as a company with soul. Daniel, now 53, was finally slowing down, but he hadn't stopped. He now mentored social projects. He lived in a clean, modern mansion in a luxury gated community in the hills of São Paulo. The house had 4 suites, a private gym, an infinity pool, and a personal library where one item stood framed, the old blue notebook. "This is where it all began," he'd say to guests, who often looked at it with tears in their eyes. His daily car was a hybrid Volvo XC60, though sometimes he'd take out the white Mustang his daughters gave him for his 50th birthday. "Just to remind myself the road's still mine," he'd joke. They spared no expense for him, and he never held back with them. But what they showed off most was the bond, the respect, the story. Together they created a foundation named DEC, Daniel, Elisa, Clara. It offered free financial education to low-income families, entrepreneurship courses for single mothers, and full scholarships for underprivileged students. "We plant where we once bled," Clara said in one of her interviews. For the company's 10-year anniversary, they held a celebration at the Teatro Municipal. Daniel was invited to speak. He walked on stage in a tailored suit, flanked by his daughters, and spoke with a steady voice. "All I ever wanted was for them to have milk. They gave me the world. The crowd erupted in applause. Meanwhile, the ex-wife lived in a rented apartment on the outskirts of the city. No family, no partner, no name. She survived on odd jobs, sometimes trying to reach out. She was never blocked, but the only answer she ever received was silence. The daughters chose not to deny her help. They paid for a basic health plan, but gave no more than that. She watched everything on TV with a mix of regret and pride that hurt more than hunger. She no longer cried. She didn't have the strength. Her defeat wasn't about money. It was knowing she'd lost the one thing that could never be reclaimed, the right to say she had been part of it. Daniel, on the other hand, was writing a book. The title, The Note and the Crib. He told everything, the pain, the fight, the faith. But it wasn't a book of blame. It was a testament, an inheritance of courage for those who stayed, and a quiet lesson for the one who left. On the final page he wrote, "If you leave, let it be for self-love, not cowardice. And if someone stays, let it be for true love, because the one who loves stays." It was late afternoon when Daniel walked barefoot through his garden, a cup of coffee in hand. The twins were in the studio, recording another episode of the company's podcast. From the gate, he could hear their laughter, the same laughter from when they were little, the sound that had saved his life years ago. He sat on the porch, opened the old blue notebook, and flipped through the few pages still intact. There were his first budget notes, the girls' doodles, a handwritten recipe for beans, and at the very back, still folded, the note their mother had left. Not kept out of resentment, but as a reminder of where it all began. A car pulled up outside the gate. A journalist from Forbes had arrived for an exclusive interview. "Daniel, you're the man who went from lunchboxes to the billion-dollar market. How do you define success?" He glanced inside, saw his daughters smiling, and replied, "Success is when the people who love you are proud of what you did with the pain they once gave you." The interview was published days later, with a photo of him holding the blue notebook. The headline read, "The father who turned an abandonment note into the empire of love." The article went viral. Thousands of parents, children, and dreamers saw themselves in his story. Many cried, others started over. It wasn't just a report, it was healing. On Daniel's 60th birthday, his daughters planned a surprise. They took him back to the theater where it all began. On stage, a giant screen played videos, photos, and messages from children whose lives had been changed by the foundation. Together, they said, "Thank you, Mr. Daniel. You changed the world." He cried, for the first time in public, without holding back. Cried like a man who knew he had reached the end of a long road and saw that it had all been worth it. His daughters hugged him tightly and said, "Now it's your turn to rest. We'll carry the mission forward." That night, he came home with a heart at peace. He walked up to his study, opened the blue notebook one last time, and wrote, "The end." Then he closed his eyes in the armchair and drifted to sleep with a smile. He didn't die. He simply rested like someone who knows everything was done with love. And when the world woke up the next morning, he was still there. Alive in the lessons he taught, present in the embraces he gave, and eternal in the hearts he touched. Because what remains is what was made with love.